Antonio Guterres invoking Article 99. Now, how important do you think is that article? What kind of alarm bells does it ring? Because it hasn't happened in decades.
Thank you so much for having me over. Secretary General Guterres has invoked this particular article. It is very important. It is seeking ceasefire. It's also seeking immediate humanitarian intervention and helping cease the conflict. And this is the 7th time in the history of the United Nations that this article has been invoked. It is very significant because all past 6 attempts at doing so, 2 of them happened with reference to the Israeli-Palestinian larger conflict, because it was in line with Lebanon. But then this is the 3rd time that this particular case study has again come to limelight, and Article 99 has been invoked. But all depends on how the stakeholders and the UN Security Council members and the UN General Assembly initiates debate, takes this matter as utmost urgent and critical, and not only initiate a debate but reached a very quick consensus on what they want to do and how they want to push the ceasefire and end all the violence that is taking place. The more the hours and the days would unfold into this inaction, the more damage would be done. So it entirely depends how seriously the members take Article 99 and they implement some action on it.
So, Dr. Sahiba, what do we mean by collapsing public order, as he says that he is expecting that the public order very soon is going to collapse?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we have all seen before that limited pause that took place in which the hostages and the prisoners were exchanged, the entire North Gaza has been razed to ground. And now the southern strip is also under attack, as the soonest Israel managed to get people back in to their home. And if this happens, that also means that no communication linkages, no health care, no food, no sanctuaries, no public order, discipline, anything of that has been left intact. All infrastructure has been razed to rubble. So what and how are you going to run the administration? And if this happens, it's going to be and already it has become a huge human catastrophe and emergency, and that needs to be looked at the most critical and immediate basis.
Taken care of. All right. Coming to you, Mr. Raza Shah is an expert in international relations. We've been talking about the article that has been invoked after decades. How do you see the Israeli side responding to that, as we know that the ambassador to UN, Israel's ambassador, has called it a moral distortion of Antonio Guterres and his bias against Israel?
Okay, I don't blame the Israeli ambassador, because I would like to first give my contribution to what Article 99 is. It's a novel provision. It's symbolic in its function. What does it exactly do? Just to give you some facts, it's been invoked 3 times: 1960 in Congo, 1979 Iran, 1989 Lebanon. The other times they were just implied invocations. So my question is, what has the UN ever done in any conflict? Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Sudan, Congo, Rwanda, the list just goes on. All this is going to do is call a meeting for the UN Security Council for the 15 member states. That's all it does. It calls a meeting. It doesn't have no legal teeth. So it can't actually do or move anybody. And they're going to come, the 15 member states, and you have veto powers in there of US, UK, and France. You think that they're going to support the ceasefire? I don't think so. It's been day 60. So the UN Article 99 is what? It's supposed to be an early response. It's day 60. So as we all know, UN is dysfunctional, it's corrupt. So I don't know why there's so much hope on this UN Article 99. It's symbolic in gesture, nothing else. So therefore, when the Israeli ambassador, when he calls out the UN, he calls it as is what it is. It has no legal teeth. It has no implications on the wider region, apart from much more table talk. One thing I will probably concede to, yes, what he will do is at least bring a single focus and attention to the Gaza and to the Palestinian and Israel conflict.
Your point well taken, Mr. Raza. Also, when we are talking about the role that the world community must need to play, now let's talk about the language. You also talked about humanitarian pause or a ceasefire. Can we know a way so that we can differentiate for a better understanding of me or the viewers? How can we differentiate between these two terms, ceasefire or humanitarian pause, that the world seems to be using? And indeed, we know that there is a polarized world out there.
Look, there is a theater, okay, which is in the media, is for the PR relations. When there was a humanitarian pause just about a week ago, what was it for? Is to go back and strategize, because they were getting pounded in northern Gaza and the western Gaza Strip, in Beit al-Hanun and Beit al-Lahia. They were getting pounded there, so they needed to stop. Number one. Number two, Israelis were losing the PR war. They were shown to the world for what they are, pulverizing Gaza, destroying infrastructure, and killing innocent civilians, which under no law, whether any UN charter you bring up, and by the way, side note, UN is the biggest violator of every single UN charter that exists. So therefore, when you say a ceasefire, there needs to be a permanent solution. Right now, I don't see anybody, whether it's Russia, China, US, any of the world powers who have that strategic importance and influence can right now call for ceasefire. Israel and the Palestinians are not ready for it right now. Otherwise, if it's a permanent ceasefire right now, it means Israel has conceded defeat. And I don't think that's going to be the case. Number two, humanitarian, yes. There needs to be, in any conflict, there needs to be some sort of humanitarian corridor to take place, okay? Again, PR stunts. If you look at the 33-day war in 2006 between Hezbollah and Israel, when the war finished, the Israeli military analysts and Mossad intelligence analysts sat down together and they came up with the Dahia doctrine. What was that? In Beirut, they completely destroyed infrastructure and killed so many civilians. That became the Dahia doctrine. In any future war or conflict, there is only one aim, and it's not a military aim, it's ethnic cleansing. And you've been fighting this for the last 60 days. So I don't see no hope in any ceasefire right now. And humanitarian corridors, yes, they should be opened up, because it's a dire situation in Gaza right now.
Your point well taken, Mr. Raza. We've also been joined on phone line Ms. Naela Chohan. She has been former ambassador. Welcome to PTV World and welcome to Views on News, ma'am. Now, we were talking to Mr. Raza about the Israeli atrocities and what is happening, and we also talked about the Article 99 that has been invoked. We were talking about the language that the world is using, either it's humanitarian pause or ceasefire. Now, could you please tell us or highlight the very important question that is arising right now, that is the one place that was identified as safer zone was the southern Gaza, and now after the truce that has been ended, we were expecting that we would see some relief, but unfortunately the ground offensive have increased, airstrikes have increased, just not in the north, in the central Gaza, in the south as well. Can you tell us, all of the viewers, which could be a safer place for Gazans to move into right now, to a safer place?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, because the way Netanyahu is moving forward, you can't really predict where it will be a safe place, because even the place that Israelis have identified for the Palestinians is really a strip which is 1 kilometer wide and 12 kilometers long, where there is no food, no electricity, no amenities. So even if they're put there, because there is no war there, it's not going to help, because they will die of hunger and difficult situations. But coming back to the earlier points raised, I would like to clarify that Article 99, which the Secretary General has used, is not as simple as was explained by the earlier speaker. It is a special power, because usually in UN Security Council, it's one of the member states which has to call for a session. In this case, this has not happened. So the Secretary General under Article 99 is empowered to call for a special session of the UN Security Council, and that's what he has done. Furthermore, under this, if the UN Security Council meets, then they are empowered to either use sanctions or use force on the ground to help de-escalate the issue. So Article 99 is not as simple as was explained. I must clarify that. As regards the Israeli position, they have been calling for a resignation of the UN Secretary General because of his principled position. So I don't think he's right in any way, and it should be condemned. How can he call for Secretary General's resignation just because he's taken position of principle? Thank you.
True. Naela Saba, as we were talking to Mr. Raza as well, and he was saying that this we might see it as a symbolic gesture because the action was needed in the initial period. Now, how would you comment on that?
Sorry, say that again.
Naela Saba, I was talking about the Article 99. You said that it has been explained in a different way, and I wanted to make it more clear, as Mr. Raza was explaining, that this is more like a symbolic gesture coming from UN because the action was needed to happen in the initial week or time period.
That's what I'm trying to say. This is not just a symbolic gesture. It empowers the UN Security Council to have boots on the ground for de-escalation. And it also provides for sanctions against the violator. So that's what I'm saying, that it's not just a gesture. There is an implementable part of this article.
Right, this is an implementable tool. Please stay with us while we engage with our guest here in the studio. Dr. Saiba, we'll continue with the discussion. Now, do you see this entire conflict expanding beyond the region? Because we are talking about a generation that will be carrying the scars of the war and its legacy, the horrors of the war. And we're also talking about the epidemic diseases. We're also talking about the pressure that it is creating on the mass displacements. So, and of course, something very important that is more like a global challenge, and that is radicalization. Do you see these things happening? I mean, the conflict expanding beyond the boundary and the region overall?
The conflict is already beyond the boundaries and the region. Number one, we have to see if we are looking at the tangible aspects of the conflict or the intangible aspects. Today, while we sit in this place in Pakistan, we are very much part of the conflict because we are constantly looking at what is happening in real terms, in real time. So that also changes how the conflict in today's time is occurring. Contemporary conflict is something which is really in the face and one really feels the pinch. You look at, unfortunately, young babies and children being killed, and you feel as if it's your heart which has been wrenched out. So that is one impact of the conflict, and I think that's the least part of the conflict as such. The other aspect that you yourself have highlighted about the displacements, the epidemics, so contemporary conflict, like previously as well, but now more so than before, are something that have a spillover effect, even if you want to contain them in a spatial space or in a geographical space as well. But the fact that people sooner or later would start, as Ambassador Chohan was also mentioning, they would start spilling over into other more secure areas, whether within the country, and there's hardly any secure area left for the Palestinians within Palestine, unfortunately. So where would they go? They would go to the neighboring countries. And we have seen this pattern by Israel, where they have made Palestinians time and again leave their ancestral homelands and go to places which are secure. And when they go there, those places themselves are not very rich. They are not extremely barren. So when these people go there, the locals and the conflict affected population, they come into conflict, they come into clash, and that gives rise to another nature of conflict. Then the children that you talked about, are left with these heavy trauma and scars that will last them for generations. So all of these effects, when you look at them in a very compound fashion, totally changes the dynamic of what is happening right now, right there, because this is something which unfortunately would end in a couple of days' time. But the permanency of the scars and the trauma would remain and haunt people forever and forever. So this is something that needs to be taken care of, and these are often areas which are not highlighted or taken into account by people.
Right, right. Mr. Raza, coming back to you, I'd like to ask you, are we setting a kind of precedence now that we see, if we talk about the interests of the global north and we are working for them, and then there's the consequences that we are not even seeing there, there's no accountability. So do you think the world powers or the bigger economies can in the future use this as a precedence, as in we know there's no accountability as for now?
Okay, I would like to first point to a particular, or shall I say, a geopolitical angle and an eschatological angle here, which I think is probably missing here. Firstly, any geopolitical analyst or a military defense analyst will know that there's 7 major choke points in the world. 3 of them are in the actual Middle East. Strait of Hormuz, which is just between Oman and Iran. Then you have the Bab al-Mandab, which is between Somalia and Yemen. And then you have the Suez Canal, which runs through Egypt. There is a plan which is called IMEC, which is the India Middle East corridor. And this joins from Ahmedabad in India, joins to Dubai to Saudi Arabia, Jordan, then to Eilat, which is the south of Israel, and there's a train link road transportation corridor which gets to Ashkelon. Now, itself has a roughly 10 times more capacity than the Suez. So what this will do, in effect, if Israel is able to decimate Gaza, flatten the land, and then build the Ben Gurion Canal in Eilat, and then Ashkelon and the Gaza Strip that runs there, that gets built as a port. US and Israel will then control the world maritime trade. This is the real war here, number one. Number two, if you actually look at the rhetoric that's coming from Israel and all of their political senior leadership, they are quoting biblical scriptures and the Talmud. Same thing with the axis of resistance. Every time they speak, they quote from the holy book. So there is eschatological dimensions here as well, which no one should ignore. And it's all about Masjid al-Aqsa for both of the groups here, whether it's axis of resistance or it's for the Israelis and the global north. So back to your question, just to focus on there. Will this be a wider conflict? Yes, it will. Will this stop? No, it won't. This is going to be a permanent war, and there's going to be temporary peace, truce, ceasefire along the way. I can't see this conflict having a ceasefire within the near future. Israel has only got 2 months to quickly wrap up this war. Otherwise, there's massive political, economical permutations, implications, consequences internally for that country.
Mr. Raza, you were talking about ceasefire, you were talking about truce, of course, and the world at large might be very much towards of the view to end this conflict. And we know that Qatar mediated a truce that ended so badly because we have been seeing a ground offensive and airstrikes, coming in full circle. Now, how do you see in future? Do you see any truce happening? Now, we've also been coming to realize that there are still mediators or negotiators trying to talk on a more diplomatic level.
Most of the mediators, interlocutors, and the middle people have got their own agendas, okay? Be it Qatar, be it Saudi Arabia, or Russia. This is a trans-regional interconnectivity corridor war. This is a geopolitical, everyone needs to analyze this. I've said this on many shows before as well, okay? So these are vested interests. If there's a ceasefire, they need it because of the trade routes. If someone doesn't need a ceasefire because they want Israel to then establish that maritime trade route, so Suez Canal loses its functionality or loses its importance within the trade. This is a very important geopolitical game for Israel. This plan has been on for a long time. This was actually, it's called EAPC, Eilat Ashkelon Partnership Corporation, Pipeline Corporation, conceived, I think, in 1964 or 1960. It was a dead duck in 1979 because of the Iranian Revolution. In 2018, in the Abraham Accords, this was mentioned in there. So all of the Arab GCC countries who are part of the normalization deal are part of this. They want this pipeline and this maritime trade route to come into function and operation. So ceasefire from the Arab countries, from the GCCs and the wider Muslim world, I don't think so.
Right, what a detailed insight, and your point well taken. Now coming back to Ambassador Chohan, we've been hearing Mr. Raza talking about deeper issues, talking about geopolitical a game plan that has been now been revealed to the world. Now, how do you see the spillover effect of the entire conflict, you being the former ambassador, Ms. Chohan?
Spillover in what context? Because I agree with the earlier speaker that Netanyahu's agenda is to, wrap up by January 2024 because they're going into elections in March, I think. So already Netanyahu regime is under a difficult situation because the families of the hostages, Israeli hostages, are protesting against Netanyahu's policy. So being a politician, he has the agenda to be re-elected, and the way things are going, it's not in his interest, except that they continue with this policy of greater Israel. Greater means that bigger landmass. For which they are pushing out Palestinians from their homes. As far as escalation is concerned, God forbid if it does, then it will be a disaster for the whole world because there's so many stakeholders in this crisis. But let us see. Now that the UN Secretary General has invoked Article 99 and UN Security Council is going to meet, let's hope that United States will not use its veto power and good sense will prevail to stop this atrocity that is being committed by Israel. I would also like to clarify the difference between truce and ceasefire. Truce is a negotiated short pause in the war, and this was done through a lot of negotiations to provide humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians. And again, Israel has put embargo on even getting them oil for transport, for food, for anything. And it's winter now, so it's terrible for them. Ceasefire is when the two parties that are adversaries decide to cease the war, that is, stop the war. That is not happening in the near future, at least from Netanyahu's agenda. That doesn't seem so. For him, it's only his political goal, which is driving him to this madness.
Right. Ambassador Chohan, we were talking about humanitarian crisis that is unfolding. You also talked about aid being given to them, the food, water, and we know that Rafah crossing has been bombarded as well. So do you see any aid? What kind of aid? How much would the Israel be allowing? How do you think Israel would be allowing the aid to enter and where it could help with the basic necessities of the people in Gaza?
Israel has no sympathy for the people. So I don't expect any goodness from them. They have a very vicious agenda. But the point is the pressure of the international community and how well the Palestinians negotiate with the Israelis as far as the hostage exchange is concerned, prisoner of the Palestinians and hostages of Israel if they can manage to strike um, a negotiation in which Israel, for their own sake, allow the humanitarian assistance to reach to the people, we might see something happening. But at this moment, it is very difficult to predict that. Mainly, let's see how this Secretary General's initiative unravels. How does it play out? That needs to be seen.
Yes, indeed, that needs to be seen how it unravels. Coming back to Dr. Saiba. Dr. Saiba, we were talking about the vicious agenda of Israel, and we are talking about the rhetoric of Israel that it is creating, and we are also talking about the narrative. We see the narrative building in the entire world. Now it has taken a completely different form. Now, they have been using the words achieving war goals. These words could be dangerous, and I think they've already lost the war when it comes to media, because now social media is active. Now people themselves are knowing what is truth and what is not, and the West is heavily, investing in the campaigns for Israel. So how do you see the entire situation playing out regarding the rhetoric?
Mine, Saba, the main problem here is that the public may be in favor of the Palestinians, the entire global community, the humanitarian sympathies and empathy maybe with the Palestinians, but is it really affecting positively their fate, and is it saving them from the Israelis? Unfortunately not. Is it also motivating the individual countries, big and small, across the spectrum, whatever religion they may belong to, from doing something to help the Palestinians out of the situation? No, because the global community is very much sure about and complete about this notion that if they are dying, so they are dying, at least we are safe. And the spillover effect of the war that you were talking about would not actually carry over in the entire world. So unfortunately, the news is not very optimistic. It is very pessimistic, because despite having Article 99 invoked, despite having this initiative by the UN Secretary General that he can at any time call the meetings and all of that stuff, and seeking immediate action, the immediacy of the action also may mean days to weeks. And days to weeks mean a lot in such conflicts. I mean, within 2 months, 15 to 16,000 people have been killed.
More than 7,000 children.
And more than 7,000 of them children, which actually means that Israel is hell-bent and very confident that it has the entire silent as well as vocal support of all those who matter in this picture, and it can get away with whatever it needs to do. As Shah Sab had also pointed out, that the UN is so weak in this picture that they cannot do anything without the consent of the P5, the veto powers and all, and the veto, and one country vetoes any vote against Israel, and it's a complete logjam. So the system by itself is so flawed, plus the fact that when we talk about humanitarian intervention, there used to be a very fashionable word at one time that was called R2P, then there was a preemptive attack to help people in plight. All of these are notions which have been used and manipulated via the UN platform to fulfill political agendas of one country or another, and that is exactly how it is happening now as well. The global community may be motivated, we all may be moving in one sync for the Palestinians, but do we actually see, and I'm not really instigating anyone because that kind of becomes against the international norms, but do we see anyone going and helping those people out, fighting with them, for them, any country pledging that, okay, I will be the mouth as well as the muscles for the Palestinian? No one has done that, and it's not even going to happen. So the Palestinians, unfortunately, would remain outnumbered, would remain voiceless despite all the voices around them, and it is them who are going to suffer at the end. So this is not exactly a very, very optimistic picture. It is very sad and pessimistic account of what is happening and what is more going to happen in the coming days.
Shah Sab, since we were discussing data, we came to know the latest data that the death toll, that the numbers are going to keep increasing, more than 16,000 casualties, and amongst them more than 7,000 are children. And coming back again to the same point where I was pointing out the global north, and we talk about the human rights advocacy groups, we talk about the freedom of expression, we talk about even about that in the art pieces and the caricatures, and here we are talking about kids being massacred mercilessly. Your comments, sir?
Very good question. Pre-COVID, I'm from London. I'm sitting in London right now, and it's probably the capital, along with USA, advocates human rights and peace and freedom of speech, freedom of rights, freedom of movements. Yes, you can say what you want as long as it's within the norms of the culture and law. I think post-COVID, one thing that's happened to Western societies is inflation's been rampant, poverty has increased, and this particular war has exacerbated one thing, which is what? Which is the moral decay, the double standards that the West have always advocated post-World War II. Yes, that we are the champions of human rights. We are the ones who advocate for peace. Everyone on the street here right now, whether it's in the Western capitals of Paris, London, New York, Berlin, wherever you go now, people are actually realizing, how come there's a double standard for Russia and Ukraine? How come there's a double standard for Afghanistan, Yemen? This has been at war for 8-9 years. Yet when it's Israel and Palestine, there's a double standard. So the Western leaders are having their own problems. You've got on the streets of London saying Rishi Sunak out, Rishi Sunak out. And Biden's, his ratings are low. So all your Western leaders are having a massive problem. And this, they have been found out because Israel's agenda is now being exposed. Forget the governments for now. It's the people. They realize now that the truth, that we've been lied to. And the media, the mainstream media, is a massive cover-up. It has been run by a conglomerate which is controlled by a few families. So coming back to your question, sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Shasa, we were talking about the Global North's advocacy groups expressing themselves to the human rights, even when it comes to art pieces or caricatures. Here we are talking about thousands of kids being massacred. This was my question.
Exactly. So I think the people on the ground, societies, no matter which religion you belong to, which culture, which race, they realize when they see genocide, when they see evil as callous, as clear as the daylight, they will call it out. And this is where Israel's moral authority that it supposedly had has come crashing down. And I'd like to add on this, that in 1948, Israel started a colonial settler project that for all the Jewish people around the world, come to this land, it's the promised land to give you peace and tranquility. Up to 6th of October, maybe this promise was fulfilled. 7th of October, this plan has now failed. We're seeing the closing of the colonial project from 1948. This is Israel's agenda. Expel the Palestinians from the land of Gaza. And this is the consequences where you see children being massacred, women and innocent civilians being homeless and they're being displaced. It's unfortunate. The world is seeing it through their phones. And yet you had the other respected lady there said that no one's doing nothing. There are parties. There is Hezbollah, there is Ansar Allah, there's Hassan Shabi from Iraq, Zainabiyun, Fatimiyun, Abbasiyun. There are many, many groups. They are playing their role. Yes, I do agree that on a wider scale, we don't see a massive movement, but there is such a complex situation. There's so many stakeholders in the parties, but there are people and groups politically and on a military level are playing their role, trying to, as much as possible, to grant that victory in behalf of the Palestinians.
Shahzad, this is something very important and this is something very interesting. You talked about the history, you talked about 1948, it was a closing out of colonialism. And we have been watching the incidents when we see events like Nakba, the catastrophe. We see more than 15,000 Palestinians being mercilessly killed. We see more than 500 villages, towns, cities being destroyed in the same manner. So what did the world do then, and what are we expecting the world to do now? Because it is more like history is repeating itself.
I agree. That's a lesson for everybody. History always repeats itself. They didn't do nothing then. They're not going to do nothing now. Only the Palestinians and the axis of resistance and certain concerned parties, may that be Russia or China, who have their own geopolitical and commercial interests, they're the ones who can put pressure on Israel, whether it's politically, whether it's diplomatically, or from military. I will say one thing: the more this war escalates, okay, when I say escalate, currently there is an escalation management. Whenever Israel increases its bombardment and the severity and the intensity of its strikes, you see in the northern border of Hezbollah, you see the Ansarullah attacking the Eilat ports, because that is very strategic, and the Iraqi Hashd al-Shabi, the terrorist groups there, they're also pounding American bases. Even today, I think they had 6 strikes, 2 in Syria, 1 in Iraq. So there is that pressure that's taking place, and America probably holds the card when it comes to persuading strong-arming Israel. Do not escalate this war. Why? Because American hegemony and power is being, they're losing that influence within the Middle East, specifically the Muslim street. If they lose that, then you're giving the Muslim world are going into the laps of China and Russia. And that's where we're going to see the multipolar world emerge. And maybe from this, we'll see emerging of new powers and a new contours and new fracture lines.
Right, all right. Mr. Shah, now we come to Ambassador Chohan. We've been talking about the Article 99, and we also talked about the tool. It's a powerful tool, as you said in the beginning. Now, you being the former ambassador, how do you see the bigger picture? How do you see, when we talk about the finality of the entire scenario that's playing out in front of us? Your comments, please.
Maheen, you see, it's a very fluid situation. It's difficult to say what the finality will be. Different stakeholders are playing their cards differently. UN Security Council is going to meet, even, the resolution on humanitarian assistance, UK and Russia abstained. USA vetoed. So you can't say just USA. There are other players also who have their different agendas. And in the real politics, it's their vested interests that are more important to them than actually the so-called humanitarian issue. It's unfortunate that it's very vicious, but they are all pursuing their own perceived vested interests and national interests, irrespective of the on-the-ground reality. Let's hope good sense will prevail, but I would refrain from making any predictions on how the finality will be.
Right, Ambassador Chohan, and coming back, Dr. Saiba. Now, we are talking about the finality that we yet don't know, and as Ambassador Chohan was telling, that it's more about the vested interests and it's not about humanitarian. It's something very sad. Now, do the world still believes in this two-state solution? Is there any possibility where Israel and Palestine, of course, it seems impossible right now, but can we look at it in a way that's maybe good for both, or at least these war crimes should stop at some point regarding the two-state solution?
Maheen, yes, two-state solution is very much possible, and it's a pretty practical solution if you talked about that. There are several countries which are supporting it, and it's not something which is unthinkable or not undoable. It is very much there. However, you see, the point that we are all alluding to is the high-handedness of the Israelis, as well as the support Israelis are getting from the international quarters, that if this is an economic corridor war, and the US is putting its weight behind Israel to be the principal thug and do whatever they want to do, then the picture is very clear. If they are not stopping Israel because of a very powerful Jewish lobby which is backing everything in the US, in the West, also manipulating the public opinion, holding the media houses very strong, whatever the situation it may be, if it's the internal elections in Israel, Netanyahu's dipping population graphs which suddenly tripled overnight, and so many other things folded into one, there's never one aspect which which kind of controls such dynamics. Yet the fact is that it has to be the international community that eventually prevails upon Israel, and principally those countries which have a strong sway on Israel, that makes Israel come to this particular point that there have to be two states.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Salma. Your quick comment before we leave. We have had a beautiful and insightful discussion. Shahsab, your comment on what could be done when it comes to the solution.
Two-state solution is a dead duck, with all respect. Look at the maps from 1948 to 1967 to 2002, and then onwards. Look at illegal settlements and how lands have been stolen. So how do you rewind history? I don't understand. When Russia and China, they advocated two-state solution, it doesn't make sense at all. That's just a symbolic gesture from these countries saying, oh yes, we advocate for peace, two-state solution. Does not make sense. Israel has took it to the point where there's a point of no return towards a two-state solution. It's impossible.
Right. Your point well taken. Ambassador Chohan, your comment, please, and that would be more like a concluding comment because we are pressed for time.
Well, the two-state solution, ideally is a great solution, but since Israel has expanded beyond all limits, what seems is they're pushing Palestinians out of Palestine, forcing them in Sinai, forcing them in parts of Jordan. So if you talk about two states, perhaps Israel would want, with collusion of some superpowers, to create a new peace cutting from these Muslim countries to call it Palestine. But the actual Palestine, it seems that Netanyahu wants to take over all of that. But let's pray for the best and hope for the best, and that's all you can do.
Indeed, we are hoping for the best. And Dr. Salma, towards the end, your closing comment, because Shahsab said that this more seems like elusive and it isn't possible. Any comment?
As I said, there's nothing optimistic to look forward to. One can only hope that what we wish happens and sanity prevails. But there is also a method to the madness Israel is employing in getting whatever it needs and whatever it desires. And it has all the gods putting their weight behind it. So long as that happens, anything even practical or possible would not really actualize. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. We had Dr. Salma Malik, expert foreign affairs. On phone line, we had former Ambassador Naela Chohan, and on Skype, we had expert international relations Raza Shah. Thank you all so very much for joining in this discussion. And viewers, there's a question still that remains. Would there be more flares coming from the Israel into the skies of Gaza? Would there be more screams? Would there be more buried bodies under the rubble? Would there be more mothers looking for the identity of their children? What what kind of conflicts are we going to see more? And when are these atrocities going to end? And when is this horror of war going to end? This is the question that still remains. Stay tuned to PTV World and keep watching Views on News.